Greg, can you hear me?
Yep, you sound loud and
Perfect.
clear. How about me?
Perfect. Testing, testing. Yes. What was that commercial back in the day? It's like, do you hear me? Do you hear me?
Yeah,
That's like the story of my life with technology between earbuds and having to unmute myself, which is
we're
a
trying.
lot.
Yeah, even this, our camera is supposed to follow my voice. So as I go from machine to machine, I want to make sure that it actually shows correctly. Actually, I should try to get on the rower now and just see if it follows me down here.
It
Camera.
looks like a nice setup. That's is that at HQ or is that your home gym?
Oh no, I wish it was my home gym. No, this is at Concept2.
Okay.
During COVID, I was at home working and I got this awesome phone call from my boss saying, would you mind building out the new Concept2 gym? And so it was like a dream come true. So
Sign me up.
I had their checkbook instead of mine. So everything went through me to Rogue. So
It is like Christmas, right? I think anyone on this call who's an owner, when you're at that stage of opening up, you're like, I always see all the posts now on social media of unpacking the boxes. It's more exciting than Christmas, actually.
I purposely didn't ask what my budget was, because I figured I'll just spend it, and then if they get mad later, then that's okay. So
Go big or go home.
yeah.
Everton, where are you based out of? Sorry to put you on the spot. Your camera is up, so I figured I'd call you out.
Yeah, hi. I'm from Brazil, actually.
Oh wow.
Hi.
Yeah.
What's the time
Northeast.
difference? So
So now is about 2:59 p.m.
okay.
So it's not that different. What time is it? It's
so
it's
Eastern time is around 2 o'clock here. Yeah, 2 o'clock.
Oh, okay.
Exactly on the dot.
It's 1 hour difference.
Yeah. Well, we have quite the group on this call. I had 139 people register at this point. So wow. I would say it's going to be a good crowd coming from all over. For those of you on this call, the rep team has been trying to collaborate a bit. At times, we were each doing our own thing regionally, and it made sense to cast a larger net. So that's why a lot of times these calls are trying to cater to different time zones. And so they're usually consistently at 2 p.m. to hit all the other regions. But with that said, they're open to everyone. So, and I know they've been trickling in the international community. Brazil's perfect because of the time, but I know someone else had asked me and they're like, it's 2 a.m. here. I think that was Malaysia. Can you send me the recording?
Wow.
So, but
it's crazy.
Well, I'm going to give everyone just maybe 1 more minute to join on. Everton, when did you affiliate?
I'm in the affiliate right now, actually. I'm in the Equilibrio CrossFit. It's northeast from Brazil. It's
okay.
It's more like at the tropicals. It's in the hot side in Brazil.
Well, we're going. I don't know what hot is to you, but we're hitting 100. Which I know for a Texan, I don't want to offend any Texans on this call who are like, that's nothing. But it's like, the big news of the day of the Northeast hitting this wave from last week to now.
Yeah.
Rodrigo.
Hey, Rodrigo. Dale, Rod. E aí, filho?
Well, Greg, I'm going to do a quick intro and I'm going to hand the baton to you, but let's get this ball rolling. I know there's people hopping on, and as you hop on, if you don't mind putting yourself on mute. For those of you who I haven't connected with, I'm Danielle Williams. I am the Northeast rep. And like I was discussing before, if you were on this, not to be redundant, but our US rep team is trying to collaborate more with these calls. So you'll be seeing anywhere from 5 to 10 calls posted a month that are topic based. So it's great to have you all on this, and thanks for prioritizing today. We will be recording this call too for your reference, because I know we'll be unpacking a lot. We have Greg Hammond. He's been part of Concept2 since 1996. Is that Greg? Is that right?
Yep. 1996.
Yeah, he's like the muscle behind Concept2. And in May, for those of you who missed the call that was about general cleaning and erg maintenance, we went off of feedback all directly from you in a follow-up, which was we want to dive into techniques. So we have Greg here sharing the basics. We're keeping it to the basics today on both the ski erg and also the rowing, the rower or erg, yeah. With that said, he has a presentation plan for you, but as we progress with this, if you have any questions, just put them in the chat. If it makes sense to interject, depending on how that's going, I'll be moderating that. Otherwise, we'll wait till the end, and depending on how much time is left, we'll also have a Q&A for that. So yes, Greg, thank you for your time in advance and looking forward to this.
All right, well, I'll be right up front. It is the first time that we've tried this, so the camera's it's kind of a new thing for us. So it should take a while, but as I move, it'll should adjust. So kind of a proof of concept, because if this, no pun intended, if this works out, we'll do more stuff from in-house at Concept2, possibly even do some maintenance stuff, repair stuff, things like that. Just so as of right now, the most of the time I have interaction with affiliate owners is if I'm traveling for work and I stop into affiliate to work out myself, or the games or Rogue Invitational or something like that. And typically everyone is so busy that we don't get the questions answered. So we want to make sure that we're a little more accessible to you guys. And then like Danielle said, this is going to be basically a gross overview of technique. Basically the common mistakes that I see or we see when we travel, specifically around the CrossFit community, whether it be in an affiliate or even at some of the other events, or even online, because we follow all that information and see what everybody's posting, and we would never call anybody out on technique, but we do see a wide variety of technique out there. With that said, if you do want to deep dive into any technique, we have some favorites, people that are really good at helping with technique. And one is Dark Horse Rowing, which is Shane Farmer, longtime CrossFitter, started out at Invictus, back in the 2000s, it was a while ago. He rowed in college. He's really good. So Dark Horse Rowing. The other one is going to be is Concept Fitness, which is Lizzie Carson, who's an East Coast affiliate owner. She's really good, her and her husband. And then also Hall Strength, which is James Hall. Oddly enough, his brother is Eddie Hall, the former world's strongest man. James holds a lot of records on our equipment, and he actually is very, very good at articulating technique. What I don't want people to see is like, oh, he just does well because he's a massive human being. That's not the case. His technique is actually really, really good, and he's a massive human being. So that's why that's if you want more in-depth technique on top of our own website, which we have videos and can help and things like that. So what I was going to do is I was going to start with the ski erg, because that's probably the newest piece of equipment for most people. If they have them, they probably are going to get more out of that, and then we'll shift to the rower. But if you do have questions specifically on the machine that I'm talking about, go ahead and tell Danielle, and I'm pretty informal, so just let me know, stop me and we can go. Hopefully this will adjust. So let me do this here real quick. I can get this to spread out so you can see the whole machine. John, should I'll start moving, hopefully it'll catch up. So what we're going to do is going to start, just because you can only see the handles right now. The biggest mistake we see a lot of people is if you notice the handle looks almost like, people say, like a Shrek ear, where it's fatter on one side than the other. The way that this works on your hand when you grab it is the wide part, the part that sticks out the most, is where your palm is going to go. So it's here to there. So let me get back in here. So as you can see, my hand here onto here. Not that you can't pull it the other way, but you're going to be able to get a lot more pressure on it if it's correctly placed on there, especially if your hands are sweaty. So that's the first thing to say. The other thing to do, again, John, I'm talking to my helpful coworker here. Can you pan it back a little bit? There we go. All right, that's what we're looking for. So the next thing we're going to talk about on the skier is the connection to the machine. And the connection to the machine is going to be your feet and your hands. You want to be, and at least we try to make this in any competition, you have to have full foot on the deck. Mainly because if you stand back and you pull, you can actually pull the machine up. So you want to be full foot on the deck. And then I like to have my feet so right about where the ends of the skier stands are. That way, when you hinge forward or come down, you're not going to smack your face into the monitor. We see a lot of different technique where there's a lot of heavy hip hinging, more than you would need. So we're going to discuss that. The other thing is going to be when you start your stroke, or you start to pull, as we call it like that, we're going to be working in this range of just about the top of the head to about mid-thigh lower pockets. So all the work is going to be done in this motion. Now, when we do this, just like all things, you want core to extremity. You want the core, glutes, core, hip hinge to be what drives this motion. So it's not this, it's not just arms when you're doing it, and it's not even bend, then arms, which we see a lot of people doing that. It's going to be here to here, and what's causing this angle to come down is going to be me closing this hip angle. I'm closing, coming up from my next stroke. Closing. And if you notice, my arm, I've got a, wouldn't say about almost a 45-degree angle if you can see it when I turn in there. So I'm not straight arm like this when I go to pull, because what tends to happen, if you think about, if you have to control a weight, you're going to control a weight closer to your body better than if it's way out here. If anyone does martial arts or jujitsu or anything like that, you always want to be, you'll be stronger here than you will be out here. So that 45-degree angle, you're going to think about closing this hip more than pulling on the handles with your arms. Close the hip, back up. If you notice the angle of my arm, if I can bend enough, stays about the same. It never goes fully open. And I also don't want to see this at the top where people do this, where they actually kind of pull into the machine and do an arm bend to start. It's going to be here, close the angle, back up. Now you'll see some people, if you're going really hard, and I do it myself, so if I'm going, I'm actually coming up on my toes so that I can use some free energy from my body weight too, to drop my butt back and use my, 190 pounds to initiate the stroke. It's that free energy of coming back down. Now, if you're not coming up with a little bit of force, you don't necessarily want to force the coming up on your toes. You don't have to. But for me, driving my heels down gives me a little bit more power. Some common mistakes that we see too, some other ones that we see. Again, I mentioned it. It's the pulling your arms in and squatting. So it's this motion. That's going to be a lot weaker. You won't get the same kind of scores. The other thing is where they think they're going to hinge forward, but their hands don't move. So they do this and then their hands. Body, then hands. So it's almost like a whipping motion on there. You're going to be a lot stronger if you can stay connected through the shoulder, through the elbow, so that you can get the large muscles to do the amount of work. Another good tip, if you look at the deck here, you want to kind of have your weight slightly ahead of your toes. So you're kind of leaning towards the machine. This is exaggerated, but if you're leaning towards the machine, then you almost have to put power into your hands to keep from falling forward. And that's also going to help. As you're going. When we say about that working area, so hat to pockets, or hat to or top of the head to the thighs, and that over there, you don't want to overextend it, make a super long pull, because it's going to take you that much longer to get up for your next stroke. So again, it's wasted energy to come down here. you want that power to be up here. The next thing, and this was popular for a while, it's kind of going out of favor now. You would see the occasional person doing this when they, and the reason you wouldn't do that is, again, you're going to be better off in a straight line. So when you start coming out away from the body, you're actually doing a lot more work than you need to. You're going to be much better off to get the handles back up to the catch position as quickly as possible for your next stroke. So this is always going to get you more power than if you were to long butterfly. Not to mention, if anyone has tight shoulders, it's probably going to feel a little uncomfortable. All I can think of is the people doing that were probably former collegiate swimmers and figured they have a strength there. Trying to think if there's anything else on that. Damper setting, which a lot of people have questions on. So the damper setting on this is really just like on the rower, is going to be determined by how long you're going to be going for. Can you handle more load if it's a 10 calorie, 12 calorie type workout versus, say, you know, 5,000 meters, 2,000 meters, even 1,000 meters. So slightly less, you know, higher damper load is achievable the shorter the distance. And then also too, looking at whatever, if you're going from the skier to a different modality, making sure that you're not overtaxing yourself. Also saying that too. So when you grip, one of the things I said about the handle and where you put your hand, over gripping these handles, you don't need to. You want to be fairly loose when you're doing it, especially on the recovery, like almost wiggling your fingers on the way up, or at least loosening your grip on the way up. It's going to save your forearms for anything else you have to do, let's say a barbell movement or a dumbbell movement. So yes, at the top of the catch where there's a lot of force, you're going to be holding on tight, bringing it down. But on the way back on the recovery, when it's just the bungee cords bringing it back, feel free to loosen your handle, your fingers, and let your forearms relax on there. Was there any questions so far on skier?
Yes, Greg, Tony had a question. He mentioned it seems like stroke length on the rower gives more bang for the buck than stroke length on the skier. How much truth is it?
Yeah, actually, he's right. Mainly, so the way the monitor reads, it's drag factor, or what your damper is set on, length of stroke, but also velocity. And so that's why on this, you're better off to get that flywheel spinning faster with that really good, strong catch. Whereas on the rower, the way it works out, if you ever look at a force curve, which is on our monitors, a rowing force curve is going to be a longer stroke. I mean, obviously determined by the size of the person on the machine, but it doesn't mean as much on the skier. I'm a skier guy, and it could be because I'm not tall, and I've always done better on the skier because I don't have to worry about being really long in my stroke on there. I do better at power and velocity than I do length of limb or long levers, which definitely benefit a rower. So.
Greg, I had a question too. You had going back to your foot placement. Do you have a general frame of reference of like what I got out of that is make sure you don't hit your head and position your feet back. But say you're a lot smaller athlete, like 5'2", would you have a preference to be a little further up, or what parameters would you?
It really doesn't matter on the size. You're always going to be probably within 3 or 4 inches, like in this zone here. You can see that. If you get too close, you end up with that mistake of people doing this, where they're just squatting and pulling like they're hanging off of a bar. And that's not going to be as efficient as really working in that core, that closing of the hip angle as you're going. And I know I mentioned it too, is there's no reason to do the old tricep extension at the end. You're much better off to come down and then come back up than to come down, extend the arms way back. Going back to Tony's question about length, don't give up good body position just for length. Same with the rower. Body position, good body position is always going to trump length of stroke. So work within that zone where you're strong and you're using large muscle groups and you're efficient on there. So
Well, I don't have any other questions, but if anyone wants to chime in, any questions on the ski erg for those of you who might have jumped in late, feel free to ask away right now. Put it in the chat if you don't want to speak.
And we can go to the rower too, and we can open up questions on both. Because there are similarities between the two, although like people say, oh, it's an upright rower. Yes and no. As far as the flywheel goes and how it works, on our flywheels, the way what, you know, for 50 years now has made us who we are is accuracy and durability. The durability comes from the fact that we're using air. As long as there's air, the machine's going to work. Inside the fan, I know we've done this before, or inside the flywheel is a fan. The harder you row or you ski, more air gets sucked into here, dispersed out through here. That's going to be your drag load. Your damper setting, the 1 to 10, is going to be what allows either more air in or less air in on this damper. And that's where, if anybody wants to be competitive or do better on their wads or anything like that, learning pacing based on your load. Like if you're someone that just comes up and puts a damper on 10 all the time, can 100% guarantee you do better if you practice at a lower damper setting on there, even the shorter distances. So the machines are similar because of the flywheel, but after that, it kind of is going to be a lot different depending on the wave of contraction. This one being frontal plane, closing of that hip angle. Rower, exact opposite. It's going to be the opening of the angle and more posterior chain and quads. Did a question come up, or do you want to start on the rower?
Yep. Greg, we had a question. One was related to the computers on both machines. Can you speak to that? Like, are there any differences of those?
Yep. So there's not. The biker has a little bit different internal software in it, but the rower and the skier are the same. So basically, it's taking in length, velocity, drag factor, and it's giving you a score. Okay. It's going to give you wattage, it's going to give you calories, and it's going to give you meters. And as most of us know, the calorie rating on that is not a true, you know, caloric output. We're not taking in a gas exchange. It's literally based off, I believe, 155-pound nail. So that's still standardized, but it's not a true calorie count, like calories in, calories out type of thing. So those are the three units that we use.
Okay. And I had a couple other questions. Is there a good stroke rate to be skiing at that you would recommend?
Yeah, it's much higher than the rower. And so that's a good question. Typically, you're going to see anywhere from between 50 to 75, 80, maybe, depending on how hard the person's going. One thing we want to say on both these machines, this kind of blows people away, is the machine doesn't read anything on the way back in. So on the rower, when you're coming forward for your next stroke, or on the skier, when I'm coming back up, it doesn't care. It only reads the velocity and the distance of the stroke itself. So when we say recovery on the rower or the recovery stroke on the skier, it is a true recovery. You can take time to come back up, to get that good body position, to lock your lats down, to really keep the core tight. That's all stuff that should be going through your head as opposed to flailing on there. So keep in mind the money maker on all of our machines, or on these two machines specifically, is going to be on the drive portion. Recovery is recovery. So.
Okay. And one question, how does the drag factor differ on the skier versus the rower?
So the drag factors, it's always going to, so that's the thing, the drag factor, it's literally reading, say drag factor is how fast the flywheel is slowing down between strokes, okay? So depending on where your damper is set, that's going to adjust your drag factor, because more air makes the flywheel slow down faster. Now on the skier, you'll see there's an extra damper ring basically right here. It just covers up more of it. So what it does is it shifts that drag factor range lower on there. And that's mainly because, yes, you're using a lot of large muscles, but you're not like the rower, we're using really big muscles. So we kind of tone it down a little bit with that damper ring. So a 5 on the rower and a 5 on the skier, it's going to be a different drag factor, even though they're both on 5, because of the front being more closed off by that piece of plastic. So.
Okay. Our last question, which Everton, we'll say that to the end, but he had brought up about the options of connectivity in terms of integration with apps and other options of uses in classes. But Greg, did you want to move on to the rower, and then we can, or if you want to address that now?
Yeah, remind me though, but we'll go over it after. But
Yep.
There's more than ever now. There's lots of choices. So, all right, so we're shifting over to the rower now. And I know everyone's seen the rower, probably all have them in the affiliates and all that stuff. So basically we're going to go to the same kind of thing. So we're talking about how are we attached to the machine? It's going to be your hands, your feet, and your butt. Okay, so let's look at that. So when you're on the seat, we'll start with the butt. You're going to want to be to the front edge of the seat, not so much back, even though you'll see it's kind of contoured here and people wonder why there's a divot in the back. That's literally for your tailbone for when you do your layback. It's not backwards. So for me personally, I like to have basically my glutes just past the front edge of the seat, so that when my feet are on the footboards, I don't have that really tight pinch at the hamstrings. You know, it feels more comfortable than, say, if I'm way back on the seat here. So front edge of the seat. When you set up your foot straps, the ideal position for the foot straps is going to have the strap go right over like the bottom lace of your shoe. And that's going to be so that when you come up on the stroke, you don't have a lot of extra resistance, you know, if your heel comes up on there. So that's the best way to do it, is to have it that lower lace there. So once you're on your here, you're going to come up to your handle. Ideally, you're going to be at the ends of the handle. So personally, I like to have my pinkies just off the edge. And you should have your thumbs underneath, but you don't grip it like a handlebar on a bicycle. You want to be fairly loose on the handle as you're driving back. So just like, and I'll just go over this now, just like on the skier, same kind of thing. So don't forget. So as you're rowing on the way forward in this recovery, you know, there's no real resistance on the way forward. You actually want to lighten up your grip, open it a little bit, wiggle your fingers before you come up to the next stroke. By doing that, it's going to keep you, again, from blowing up your forearms. People who tend to overgrip tend to be really tight in the shoulders too, like they're really trying to pinch. You want to be loose. The connection to the handle through your arms should be thought of like a chain or a rope. Basically, your arms are there to connect the power of your quads, the power of your core. It's going to transfer up through your shoulders, down your arms, and into the handle. Okay, so it's an extension of the chain. That's what we want to think of. And when we teach this, most coaches are either going to teach it from the finish, which would be here, or they teach it from the catch, which is what I tend to do. So this would be your catch position. Okay, you want to have your shoulders kind of loosened down and back, your lats kind of engaged, scapula's turned in, so you're nice and stable. You want your shins straight up and no more than straight up and down. Those of us with tight hamstrings, this is straight up and down for me. So you're going to be here at the catch. As you drive, you are driving with the legs. And if you notice, see how my seat's moving and my handle's moving? Both are moving identical. So for every inch my seat moves, my handle moves. You know, I want to have this, which you'll see a lot. If you watch any Instagram videos, you'll see a lot of people will have this little disconnect where the seat goes and then they try to catch up. If someone ever came to me and said, Greg, my low back hurts when I row, I can almost guarantee if I filmed them from the side, they would see it themselves. Because what's happening is the seat moves, they're playing catch up, so they have to open up their back, and that's when they're getting all the force, you know, to that area. So again, catch, I'm driving with my legs. When my legs are straight, my arms are still straight, then I'm opening with my hip, and then my hands come in. And they're not coming in up here, they're coming in nice and relaxed and down. You shouldn't feel like your traps are completely engaged when you're rowing. So you're gonna have this handle come into your sternum, not really low, not really high, kind of there. And then this would be basically the finish of the stroke. And now to get back from my next stroke, it's gonna be just the opposite. It's gonna be the hands hips, knees, catch. Again. What I like to tell people, and I hope you can see it, so you'll know you're doing this. If you ever row and you have to do this and lift the handle up over their knees, what's happening there is your handle's getting caught behind your knees. That won't happen if you do this. Arms, hips, legs. What's happening when I do that and I lean forward, I'm creating a window, this little window here, that my knees come through, see, as opposed to being this. So if you have members that are rowing and you see the chain doing this, chances are it's because they're having to lift to go over their knees. They're doing this. So to break it down, shoulder blades down and back, fairly relaxed hand grip until I actually start to drive. I drive, my legs are straight. I open my hip, not excessively back. You just want your shoulders to be about the back of the seat. Nothing more than that. Handle to the sternum. Arms, hips, knees. And you can segment it if you want, but ideally you want to be as smooth as possible. You want to, when the handle comes back to my chest, I'm already thinking of going for my next stroke. So I'm kind of, they used to say down and away. It's, you don't want to exaggerate it, but it's going to be just as little. It's not an end point where you're bouncing off the chest. At the games, when the guys have their shirts off, you'll see red marks on their chest. That should be a more of a gradual down and away as opposed to bouncing it off their chest as they're going. Saw a question. What's that say? What's it?
Did he say shins straight up?
Yeah, so shins should be straight perpendicular. They don't look like it right there, but yeah, you want to be you don't want to be over compressed at the front. You want to have it. So usually about 6 or 7 inches between your heel and the seat, so that your shins are straight up now, and that way you're getting a nice leg drive on there. If mine don't look like they're straight up and down, it's because I have really tight hamstrings, so it's tough for me to come in. This is another common mistake: is people will come in like this. Okay, and so they're already in a bad body position. They think if they stay laying back and they row like this, it's going to be a good thing. It's not. You want to come in, lock down, so you can get a full drive, and then use that hip opening. If you're already laid back, you don't have the added benefit of that hip swing in there. So don't stay in the lay back position. Come forward, boom, open. And then we were talking about the recovery phase. One of the things you can do with your folks in the gym when you're doing it is have them do a nice setup, a good drive, have them stop, pause right there, boom, boom, stop, drive. That's going to teach them that segmenting. The other cueing thing that works really well, and if you're a little bit more careful with some of your clientele, this is probably better off done one-on-one with a coach, is it's called strapless rowing. So take your feet out of the straps. And if you can row with your feet out of the strap, you know you're not overlaying where you're going to fall backwards. You get better connection when you're doing it. Again, make sure you're spotting when they're doing it. But if you can get them to row, if someone, it's not like a cue, if a client comes in and said, hey, when I row, my shins get sore. Typically that's because they're using the foot straps to pull themselves forward. So like this, okay? You shouldn't need to do that. So I can even put my feet out of the straps. By my shifting my weight, allows me to come forward without actually having to pull with my feet. I'm doing it. I mean, I am getting a little bit from my heel, but that's going to be one of the big things. And we, even at the affiliate where I went, they had same people. Some people have tight shins or their shins get sore. Quick way to fix it is by doing strapless rowing.
Brad, do you use, one of the questions I had from Tony, do you use the 1 o'clock, 11 o'clock rule for body position, or referencing any points on a clock?
Yeah, I mean, that's great. If you can do that 1 to 11, that's right in there. I think it's going to be, you know, if that gets them to where they need to be, where they're not overextending, that's a good cue as well on there. One thing I didn't say, so if you come up with a lot of force on the recovery and you get these really high, kind of over compress, you're up in here like that, you want to make sure that you have enough time to drive your heels down. It's that heels down. It's just like squatting, pushing through the heels when you're squatting, same kind of deal. You don't want to stay on your toes or push from your toes. It's going to be from about mid-foot back is where you want to have that connection into the foot stretchers on there. I'm trying to think of what else.
I was going to say, do you have, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to follow up with, you know, between the pauses and other, you know, not using your straps. Do you have any other go-to drills? I always used to do the pick drill, but is there any other things you would recommend with in a class setting?
Yeah, the pick drill is really good. When we do the rowing seminars, one of the ones that I like to get people to have that feel of hanging off the handle with a straight arm is, maybe I can use my coworker John here. Let's say, John, come here for a second. So sit on the seat. So one of the things you can do is you flip the monitor back, and here he's going to be on that, and I'm going to hold that. Now go ahead and lift right up. Go ahead. Keep pushing the leg, push the legs. See how the seat comes off? Okay, quick, see that. What that's going to do is going to teach you to have that connection with a straight arm. And when you feel yourself coming off the seat, you know you're going to have a good leg drive. Yep. Be very careful that we used to do way back with the old ones. They would use a broomstick to lock it. So if you're holding them back and they're a big person, careful they don't pull you all the way over the front of the machine. So,
should athletes row hard and force the machine to scoot across the floor?
Okay, so it's actually a good training thing. If you can put it at a slippery floor and you can get someone to row hard and have it not shuck, it means they're going to be a lot more smooth. Where it tends to shuck, unless it's like, you know, a polished basketball floor on there, you know, it shouldn't shuck. It shouldn't move. I see all these people there, they weight the front end because they're, you know, the front end is bouncing or that. What they're doing when it starts to shuck, it starts to bounce, they're throwing their shoulders, they're doing this. And when they do that, you can make the front end of the machine come up and down. So if your machine is moving while you row, like when we watch Olympic rowers train on our indoor machines, their machines don't go anywhere. And you can put them on ice and they don't move anywhere because the way they apply force, they apply power. I mean, maybe ice is excessive. Yes, it might move on that, but you shouldn't have that lot of shucking and moving on there. Which this is what I was going to say before. It's as CrossFitters, we probably all started with a PVC pipe before we had a barbell, and we learned to move with zero load other than a PVC pipe. But for some reason, we won't train at low intensity on the ergs. We always just get on, knock out our calories, and move on. And we don't really practice. I shouldn't say that's generally does that. I'm sure there's some affiliates that are right on it, but it's kind of always been a pet peeve. And if you have athletes that are so competitive that they cannot row at a moderate pace and work on technique, flip the monitor back. Don't let them look at the monitor. That's the good and bad thing about Concept2 equipment is the monitors are always staring you in the face. So, you know, you're like, oh, I'm gonna row easy today. You know, like, okay, that lasts about 10 strokes, and then you see your splits getting better. You're like, oh, I'm going a little harder, a little harder, a little harder. So, you know, maybe even as a warm-up in the affiliates, flip all the monitors back and just call out the movements of the stroke and just have everybody do it at low intensity, get the muscle memory, learn to be smooth. And like anything else, going from PVC to an empty bar to a bar with weights, ramp up the intensity as long as there's no degrading of the technique in there. So
Kim had a question. Is there any benefit on the pull if you pause at the chest before recovering?
There's no necessarily a benefit to it. It's not going to hurt you as long as, remember, if that slot flywheel slows down too much, you're having to overcome more inertia and more load. So if you're a powerful person, I mean, you can, like there are, like, I don't know if anyone saw the marathon row with Luke Esslinger when we were in the velodrome. He essentially did a marathon in a series of deadlifts. It wasn't even necessarily rowing. He was just like, pull really hard, wait, breathe, another stroke. But he also pulls very, very hard, and he did well that way. It was probably the hardest way to do a marathon, but he was able to overcome the slow flywheel with the long pause and still did very well on there. So there's a trade-off to both. You want to find that sweet spot where you have nice flow, you have enough recovery where you can get your breath back, and then when you get to the front to the catch, you have that explosiveness, the boom, get the flywheel moving as fast as you can as you travel through your stroke. Anything else?
By the way, what was his damper setting on that marathon? And now I'm just sorry, dude. I'm curious now.
Fraser was right in front of me, so I got to admit, I wasn't watching him that much except for the big screen. But I would assume, I mean, he was one of the larger, more muscular athletes, and I would assume that he probably had it pretty high to do it that style. But I can say for a fact that everyone had their own idea of how to do a marathon at the time because nobody had done a marathon. There was maybe a couple athletes that had done the half marathon, you know, a couple years before that. But when they announced it, there was a lot of frantic texting and calling and trying to figure things out last minute. And I got to say, it doesn't sound pleasant, but I think everybody should do a long row and a long ski sometime, meaning hour plus, just to see what it's like. I mean, when it comes right down to it, even the skier, people say, oh, I could never do a marathon on a skier. The weight of your arms will pull the handles down. So it's not like it's going to be something that's going to break you. It's more of a mental thing. Like, how long can you just keep your brain in it and keep good technique to do it? So at least with us at Concept2, we have challenges all the time. And especially around end of the year, holiday challenge is a good time to maybe spend some longer time on the ergs and join the challenge, and you know, helps raise some money for some good causes. But I think you're going to feel a lot differently about 2Ks and 5Ks when you do a half marathon or a marathon. It's not going to seem as bad. I'll jump back on that one question on the apps. So there are a lot of good apps out there now. We have our own app called Erg Data, which is free. So everybody should have it on their phone. And when they're on a machine that especially has a PM5, you can pair it. And then if you really want to look at the nitty gritty numbers of your stroke, it will bring into things like you can overlay your wattage and your pace and your calories, and you can see your stroke length. And, you know, keep in mind, we're a company owned by engineers. We give you more numbers than you would ever need. But if you know how to interpret those numbers, they can be very helpful for you. So the Erg Data app, I would say it would be a must if you're in the least bit enjoy erging. After that, there's apps that give you kind of like a Zwift experience where you're actually, you know, rowing against other people around the world at the same time. And it can be more almost like a animation. I think EXR, that's another good one. Those are all, you know, pay. But if you really just want to work on your cardio on your off days or the days that you're doing recoveries and stuff like that, just go on our website, concept2.com. And if you just write apps in the search window, we have a list of all of them and which ones they work best with, you know, because now with the biker, of course, a lot of the existing biker apps, even things like Peloton, will work with our equipment. So it really depends on the experience that you're looking for. I got to say, I really don't use a lot of the apps. So when I come to work out, I like to just get after it and get done. But on things like Zwift on the biker, on the days that you're just out riding and just killing meters and things like that, it works pretty good.
Another question that came up was, do you have any advice on the position of the damper setting when you're rowing for calories versus for meters?
Yep, there's absolutely zero difference, and that's a long time CrossFit myth. I love the analogy, and I think I've said it before on a podcast. It's rowing differently for calories versus meters is like saying you're going to lift differently using pounds or kilograms. So, you know, if you have kilograms on your bar, you're not going to squat any different. And it's the same thing with this. The calories on the monitor are derived from watts, same as the meters. So there's no difference. Good, efficient rowing, good connection of the large muscle groups of the quads, it's on the rower, or the core on the skier, is what's going to give you a good score. There's literally no difference. I don't know when it started, probably almost 10 years ago. I remember seeing a chart online that said, this is how you should row for calories. And we just shook our head and let it go. But yeah, there's no difference. You're going to row efficiently, and that's going to be your sweet spot. You know, good engagement at the catch on both machines. That's going to get the flywheel moving faster. Pacing, breathing, being relaxed on the recovery. These are all what's going to get you better scores.
That's great. Does anyone have any other questions?
I'll put a plug in too that if you guys do have questions, we're a pretty amazing company. We have a lot of people on the phones. If you wanted to call and ask questions, I'm readily accessible through Instagram, just Concept2 Greg or Concept2 Inc. You can ask questions and somebody can answer your questions for you. You know, you can even, GregH@concept2.com. You can always email me too. Or I'm usually at, the games, Rogue Invitational, 2 or 3 other events too. And if I'm not actively running to an event to help support it, then grab me and ask questions.
There's also a lot of, I know you mentioned this earlier, but if anyone missed, there's tons of videos about technique breaking it down. So, and that's also on the website, that you can also subscribe to workouts of the day. I currently am always looking at that daily in my inbox.
Workout of the day is a really good one. Especially if, maybe you're a 3-day-a-week CrossFit person. Well, I mean, most people here are affiliates, they're all the time. But I mean, if you're going to take off days and do recovery, the workout of the day is a good option. So a lot of it's interval based, which is what I prefer. If you can incorporate high intensity intervals with the occasional pacing and longer rows and skis, that's where you're going to get the most bang for your buck. Again, and like people I mentioned before, dark horse rowing, really good. Concept Fitness, really good. And then James Hall. James Hall is actually currently, I think he's traveling the world right now teaching ski erg and row. And, he's got some good content on there. And don't be put off saying he's only that good because he's got genetics from a brother that's the world's strongest man. He has good technique as well.
Well, I'll work on, I was taking notes as this call was going, but I'll work on just doing a recap for all of you, including a recording where if you're interested in passing it along to your coaching teams, and have all the resources that Greg had referred to throughout the call on paper for you to disseminate as well. So Greg, thank you so much for your time. And I'll be sending that email out. If you have any feedback, let's use Greg for future calls, right? It's all of these calls are based on feedback from all of you as owners. So if there's something, Press, that you think you'd find value and the group would find value, please let your rep know or just respond directly to me on that email. I'm based out in the Northeast. So, we're looking to continue doing a series of these calls as long as you guys are finding value and showing up.
And that can also go to, like, it doesn't always have to be about technique, but if you have questions about the company, anything to do with Concept2, we're here for you, whether that be calling us directly or doing something like this. Like I said, we like hanging out with cool people, and it's worked out well, the CrossFit community over all these years. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Greg. Thank you, everyone, for showing up. Hope to see you on the next call.
All right. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Okay. Take care, guys.